"Excuse me, what do you think you're doing in this neighborhood?" The voice was a shard of ice, sharp and unexpected, slicing through the quiet, sun-dappled afternoon. It was the first thing Michael heard as he stepped out of the sedan, the driver's door still warm under his palm. He was holding 2 heavy bags of groceries, the kind of mundane Saturday haul filled with fresh produce coffee and a celebratory bottle of wine he'd been meaning to try. The voice, dripping with a sense of unearned entitlement, came from his left. He turned, the plastic bags crinkling with his movement, and there she was, a woman, perhaps in her late 50s, stood on the immaculately manicured lawn next door, though she might as well have been standing on a royal dais. She had a severe blonde bob, helmet-like in its perfection, and a pair of oversized sunglasses that swallowed the upper half of her face. She wore crisp, white capri pants and a striped boat-neck shirt, an outfit that screamed curated leisure. Her lips were pressed into a thin, disapproving line, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her name, as he would later learn from a sighing neighbor, was Karen, but in that moment, she was just an embodiment of unwelcome scrutiny. Michael, a man whose default expression was one of calm curiosity, blinked. The sun glinted off her sunglasses, turning them into twin mirrors, reflecting his own confused face. I live here," he said calmly, his voice even and polite. He gestured with his chin toward the large, cream-colored colonial behind him with its dark green shutters and the cheerful hanging basket of petunias by the front door. It was a house he still sometimes woke up thinking was a dream. Karen's crossed arms tightened. "No, you don't," she stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. It was a declaration, a verdict. "I know who lives here, and it's not you. The Wilsons lived here for 15 years. They moved to Florida," Michael explained, still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, to assume this was a simple case of neighborly confusion. "I bought the house from them at the beginning of the month." A dismissive, almost theatrical, sigh escaped her. "That's what you people always say. You're always renting or just visiting, pretending you own things you don't. This is a quiet street. We look out for each other here. You people." The 2 words landed not with a thud, but with the sickening, precise cut of a surgeon's scalpel. Michael froze, his knuckles tightening around the woven plastic handles of the grocery bags. The weight of them suddenly felt immense, anchoring him to the spot. For a moment, the world narrowed to the woman's smug, shielded face and the roaring in his own ears. He wasn't sure what hit him harder, the sheer audacity of her accusation or the cold, familiar chill of the racism that underpinned it. He was a 34-year-old man, a senior engineer who led teams and solved complex problems for a living. He had degrees, a 401k, and a credit score that had enabled him to secure a mortgage on this very house. This was his dream home, the physical manifestation of 1,000 late nights and sacrifice weekends, the reward for a lifetime of playing by the rules. He had pictured barbecues on the back deck, future children learning to ride bikes on the safe cul-de-sac street, growing old surrounded by the gardens he planned to cultivate. And now, standing in his own driveway, holding groceries for the home he owned, he was being accused of trespassing. The deed in his filing cabinet, the keys in his pocket, the sweat of his brow, all of it was rendered invisible by her prejudiced presumption. The cream-colored house behind him, his sanctuary, his castle, felt suddenly less solid, as if Karen's words had the power to dissolve its very foundations. The dream, just 2 weeks old, was already being challenged at its gate. Karen wasn't done. The initial confrontation had merely been her opening salvo. Emboldened by his calm demeanor, which she mistook for weakness, she escalated. With the fluid, practiced motion of someone who considered herself the neighborhood's chief enforcer, she pulled her phone from her pocket. She held it with the unshakable confidence of someone about to call the president directly. "I'm calling the real owner," she announced dramatically, her voice pitched to carry to any potential audience. Her thumb scrolled through her contacts with theatrical importance, as if she were the neighborhood sheriff consulting a most wanted list. Michael, his groceries still heavy in his arms, felt a wave of weary exasperation. He carefully set the bags on the hood of his car, the thud of quiet punctuation in the tense silence. He raised a single eyebrow, a gesture of mild, academic curiosity. "Oh, really? And who would that be?" "Mr. Thompson," she declared, her chin tilting up with pride. He's lived here for years. He's a pillar of this community. There's no way he sold this place to you. The unspoken words hung in the air, more potent than the ones she'd uttered. A soft, incredulous chuckle escaped Michael's lips. It wasn't a sound of amusement, but one of sheer disbelief at the unfolding absurdity. You mean Mr. Robert Thompson, the retired history teacher? Bald fellow, has a passion for cultivating prize-winning roses. Karen's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second, a crack in her armored certainty. Yes. How do you know that? Because, Michael said, his voice now laced with thread of steel, I bought this house from him. He pulled his own phone from his pocket, his movements deliberate and calm. He navigated to his photos, found the image he was looking for, and turned the screen toward her. It was a picture taken in a sunlit lawyer's office. There was a younger, beaming Michael, shaking hands with jovial, bald man. Between them, on the polished oak table, sat a stack of documents and a set of keys. The sold sticker was visible on the familiar facade of the house in the background of the photo. Karen leaned forward, her oversized sunglasses reflecting the damning evidence. She squinted, her mind visibly racing, searching for an escape hatch for a crumbling narrative. Her ego, however, was a fortress. That can't be real, she stammered, pulling back as if the phone were radioactive. You probably photoshopped it. I've lived here 15 years. I know everything about this neighborhood. Her voice had taken on a desperate, reedy quality. By now, the commotion had drawn attention. A curtain twitched in the house across the street. Another neighbor, washing his car, had turned off the hose and was watching intently. A few had even stepped onto their porches, their presence a silent jury. Michael could feel the weight of their collective gaze, a mix of curiosity and apprehension focused squarely on him. Seeing the audience, Karen shifted tactics. Instead of calling for backup, she decided to create her own narrative. She switched her phone to video mode, the red recording light a tiny, accusatory eye. She pointed it squarely at Michael, her voice adopting a clipped, self-righteous tone she must have learned from reality television. This man is trespassing on private property, she narrated for her imaginary followers. He's refusing to leave the premises, and as you can see, he's now becoming agitated and aggressive. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs, a primal response to the dangerous lie. He knew, with chilling clarity, exactly how quickly a video of a large, aggressive man of color could spiral out of control. He took a slow, deliberate breath, consciously relaxing his shoulders and keeping his hands visible and open at his sides. Ma'am, he said, his voice so even and controlled it seemed to neutralize the charged air between them. I think it's time you stopped embarrassing yourself. I own this property. You can call the police if you want. I'll be happy to show them my driver's license, the deed, and the photos of me buying the house you're accusing me of trespassing on. He picked up his groceries, turned his back on a recording phone, a gesture of profound dismissal, and walked calmly toward his front door, the key to his dream home feeling like both a tool and a shield in his pocket. The tension on the quiet cul-de-sac had reached a fever pitch, thick enough to be sliced by the distant, then rapidly approaching wail of sirens. Within moments, 2 police cruisers pulled to a neat stop at the curb, their lights painting the manicured lawns in silent, swirling shades of red and blue. The sound was a trigger. Karen, who had been fuming in a state of self-righteous paralysis, sprang into action like a wind-up toy. She scurried toward the officers as they emerged from their vehicles, her arms flailing in dramatic arcs. Officers! Thank goodness you're here, she cried, her voice pitched with a performative blend of relief and panic. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger toward Michael's porch. This man broke into my neighbor's house. He's been confrontational and refuses to leave. I was just trying to be a good neighbor, to protect our community. Michael had not moved. He stood leaning against the frame of his own front door, his arms crossed loosely over his chest. He watched the scene unfold with the calm, detached air of a man waiting for a predictable play to reach its final act. He had seen this script before, if not personally, then in 1,000 news clips and shared stories. He knew his role was to be still, be silent, and be prepared. The two officers, a seasoned-looking man with a close-cropped beard and a younger woman with a stern, professional demeanor, listened to Karen's frantic summary. Their eyes then shifted to Michael. The senior officer approached, his steps measured. "Sir, can we see some identification, please?" he asked, his tone neutral, procedural. "Of course, officer," Michael replied, his voice even and cooperative. He didn't just hand over his driver's license. From just inside the door, he retrieved a simple manila folder he had the foresight to bring from his car the moment he saw her start recording. He handed it over. Inside was a crisp copy of his property deed and a closing statement from the title company, his name and the property address printed in unambiguous black and white. Karen, seeing the folder, folded her arms, a triumphant smirk twisting her lips. This, she was sure, was the moment her vigilance would be vindicated. "You'll see," she announced to no one in particular, though her voice was loud enough for the growing audience to hear. "He doesn't live here. He can't. People like him." "Ma'am," the female officer interrupted, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through Karen's diatribe like a knife. "Please stop talking." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Karen's mouth snapped shut, her smirk dissolving into stunned indignation. The senior officer carefully examined the documents, comparing the address on the deed to house number, the name on the license to the name on the paperwork. He looked from the documents to Michael, then back at Karen. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the whisper of the summer breeze and the faint buzz of a lawnmower a few houses down. "This man is the legal owner of this property," the officer stated, his voice flat and definitive. He held up the deed. "The paperwork is clear. The deed was signed and notarized 2 weeks ago. Mr. Robert Thompson sold it to him." Karen's face flushed a deep mottled red, the color of a bad sunburn. The foundations of her constructive reality were crumbling, but her ego was the last thing to fall. "That can't be right," she spluttered, her voice rising an octave. "He must have tricked him. Robert would never. This man probably used fake documents or—" "Ma'am," the officer said again, his voice dropping into a lower, firmer register, laden with warning. "I'm going to say this once. This matter is concluded. This gentleman is home. If you continue to accost him on his own property and make false claims, you could be charged with harassment. Do you understand?" The finality in his tone was absolute. The small crowd of neighbors who had been watching with bated breath now began to murmur. Smartphones were raised, openly recording Karen's spectacular public unraveling. A voice, young and clear, carried from a nearby porch. "Looks like Karen messed with the wrong guy this time." The words seemed to deflate her completely. The rigid posture of entitlement collapsed into one of shamed defeat. Without another word, she turned on her heel and scurried back toward her own house, the eyes of the neighborhood following her every step, a silent, judgmental jury she had never intended to convene. The slam of Karen's front door was percussive period at the end of the ugly confrontation. The police had driven off. The neighbors had slowly dispersed, and a heavy silence had fallen over the street, thick with lingering embarrassment and judgment. For Michael, standing alone in his foyer, the victory fell hollow, tarnished by the very prejudice he had just disproven. He had the deed, but he didn't yet have a community, and so he decided to build one. The following Saturday, the air on the cul-de-sac, usually perfumed only with cut grass and quiet privilege, was filled with the irresistible, unifying scent of smoked brisket and grilling burgers. Michael's backyard, which a week before had been staged for suspicion, was now transformed. Twinkling fairy lights were strung between the trees, a long table grown with potluck dishes, and the sound of laughter and easy conversation bubbled up over the fence. Michael had personally printed invitations and placed one in every mailbox on the street, including Karen's. It was an act of strategic grace. To his mild surprise, and likely that of everyone else, she showed up. She lingered near the edge of the gathering, a glass of iced tea in her hand like a defensive talisman, her posture rigid. She was there out of a prickly mix of curiosity and a stubborn pride that refused to let her be painted as a villain in her own neighborhood. As the golden hour light washed over the party, Michael picked up a small microphone he connected to a portable speaker. The conversations hushed, all eyes turning toward him. He stood there, not as an accuser, but as a host. Friends, neighbors, he began, a warm, genuine smile on his face. I just want to say how incredibly grateful I am to be part of this community. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the friendly, curious faces. When I moved here a few weeks ago, I had a very warm welcome. Well, from some of you more than others. A wave of knowing, slightly nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. People glanced furtively at Karen, who stared fixedly at her shoes, her neck flushing a blotchy red. The story of the grocery store confrontation did not fade away. Instead, it seeded something new. Inspired by the national response and the quiet dignity of Mr. Johnson, the management of Green's Grocers decided to channel the moment into a positive force. They announced a Community Kindness Day, transforming the very aisles that had witnessed such ugliness into a venue for healing and connection. The event was held on a bright Saturday morning. The store was decorated with balloons and banners, and local community groups had set up tables. But the main attraction was Mr. Henry Johnson, standing modestly at the front of a small crowd gathered near the bakery section. He wasn't a charismatic speaker by trade, but his quiet authority commanded respect. What happened here weeks ago was unfortunate, he began, his voice calm and measured. But it reminded me of a lesson I often shared in my classroom. We can't control how people treat us, but we can always control how we respond. Anger is a fire that burns the one who holds it. But every single act of kindness, no matter how small, chips away at the hate that tries to divide us. It's a choice we make every day. The audience, a mix of regular shoppers, local officials, and curious newcomers, erupted in warm, sustained applause. The sentiment was simple, but in the wake of the incident, it felt profound and necessary. Notably present were a few of Karen's former friends. They had come not to defend her, but to silently repudiate her actions and align themselves with the community's clear stance. One of them, a woman named Susan, even approached Mr. Johnson afterward, her eyes glistening. "I'm so sorry for what you went through," she said, "and thank you for your grace. It's taught us all a lesson." Meanwhile, Karen's life had been irrevocably altered. The $2,000 fine was the least of her punishments. The true cost was a public humiliation, the loss of her social circle, and the crushing weight of seeing herself become a national symbol of bigotry. The initial defiance and excuses she had clung to slowly crumbled under the relentless glare of consequence. It was a painful, isolating period, but it forced the introspection she had spent a lifetime avoiding. Months after the incident, a local anti-racism organization announced a new volunteer. It was Karen. In a quiet conversation with the program director, she admitted, her voice stripped of its former arrogance, "I needed that wake-up call. It was brutal, but it was necessary. I was wrong and I have a lot to learn." Her journey was not met with universal forgiveness. The wounds she had inflicted were too deep for some, but many in the community, including the organization's leaders, respected the difficulty of her choice to change. They saw her not as a villain, but as a testament to the possibility of growth, however difficult and late blooming. As for Mr. Johnson, he returned to the peaceful rhythms of his retirement, his daily walks through the park, his quiet afternoons in his favorite corner coffee shop, and his weekly grocery runs continued. But now, instead of the anonymous glances of strangers, he was met with genuine smiles and respectful nods. The cashiers knew his name, and other shoppers sometimes stopped to shake his hand. In a final, touching tribute, the store placed a small, elegantly engraved sign near the entrance. It read, "In honor of Mr. Henry Johnson, a reminder that kindness always wins." Shoppers would often pause to read it, a quiet moment of reflection before grabbing a cart. The sign was more than a plaque. It was a marker, turning the site of a public breakdown into a monument for compassion. And just like that, an act of hate captured and amplified by modern technology did not end with destruction, but was painstakingly woven, thread by thread, into the fabric of community, making it just a little bit stronger and a little bit kinder for having endured it.